Hello fellow orchid lovers, it's Danielle here with a video about basic orchid care. So I've noticed that most of the questions that I receive are about basic care of mostly the Phalaenopsis orchid, and I've noticed that most of the videos that are popular on my channel are the ones having to do with care of Phalaenopsis orchids and rescuing Phalaenopsis orchids. And I think the reason for that is this is the orchid we most commonly start with. This is the orchid that we're given for as gifts. And so therefore this is pretty much what most of you are familiar with when you hear the word orchid. We think of this orchid, the Phalaenopsis orchid. And so I decided that maybe a basic general care video, I'm gonna do it in 3 parts, might be useful to some of you and answer some of the questions that I've been getting. So I'm gonna start actually with the roots and watering and fertilizing, because those are the most common questions that I actually get. And so I wanna answer those first. It's probably gonna be the longest of the 3 videos, so just bear with me. So we're gonna try to take this orchid out. So let's see how this goes. Yeah. Okay, so usually inside the decorative pot is going to be a plastic pot. And the reason for this is orchids actually need air movement in their roots. And so the decorative pot, while pretty, if they're potted in media, is going to limit air movement. And so one of the things you might want to consider is either upsizing the pot. It can still be a decorative pot, but maybe a little wider than the plastic pot so there can be air movement, or getting rid of the decorative pot if you're gonna grow in media. I grow in water culture, and so there is no media, so there's plenty of air movement no matter which pot I use. But if you're gonna grow traditionally in bark or moss or some other type of media, it's a good idea to make sure that there's air movement. Now this particular pot does not have any side holes for air movement. More commonly, there's just drain holes on the bottom for the water to come out of. So while it's good to have drain holes, it's very important because the #1 reason why we kill these orchids is because we overwater them. It's also important for the plant to have air movement in the media. So you could either put holes in the side of this, or they do sell plastic pots that already have side holes in them. And I do recommend that for you. I do really strongly believe that air movement is very important for these plants. Now, as far as watering is concerned, like I mentioned, most of us overwater. I am confessing that that is something that I did consistently for years, and I killed them all. So I cannot stress the importance of knowing when to water and not feeling like you need to water all the time. Now, I got this orchid over a week ago and I have not watered it once. And as you can see, the leaves are still firm. They are not drooping. The leaves are still really healthy. So that's a week ago. I don't know when the store watered it last. I can tell by the media that that's pretty dry. You can see that the roots are silvery. That's also an indication that the roots are drying out. So, you know, a week plus of no water and the plant is doing well. Now, that doesn't mean that this will work in your climate. If you live in a very hot climate or an arid climate, your watering routine is going to be different than mine, and you may not be able to go a week without your plant needing water. So how do we know what the plant needs? Well, like I said, #1, you're going to want to realize what type of environment the plant is in. Is it growing outside? Is it growing inside? Is it hot in your house? Is it cool in your house? All of these things are going to affect the evaporation of the water. So that's something that you're going to want to give some thought to. The #2 thing is the plant's going to tell you. So as I mentioned, these leaves are very firm. They are upright. They are not drooping. That is an indication that this plant is well hydrated. If these leaves start to droop or start to feel less firm, that is a good indication that your plant is thirsty. I'm sorry, I have a lot of animals, so you're gonna hear some noise occasionally. I am fostering, oh dear, how many is it now? 15 cats. I'm down to 15 cats. I got involved in a rescue situation, and anyways, so there's a lot of animals in the house. So if you hear dogs or cats, I apologize. Okay, so where was I? So the leaves, if they start to droop, that is going to be an indication that it needs water. Additionally, as I mentioned, when roots are green, usually it means that they've been recently hydrated. When they turn this more silvery color, that is an indication that they are starting to dry out and could potentially need water. Now, another way to check is simply to just put your finger in where the root base is and see if you feel moisture. It's a little easier when it's moss than bark, but just put your finger in here, because here is going to be drier than here. Here is going to be a little bit more damp. So just stick your finger in at the base and see if you feel moisture. And indeed I do. It's not heavy, but I do feel moisture. And so that's another indication that this plant right now is fine. Now, if you put your finger in and it's completely bone dry, then that's a good indication that it needs a little bit of water. So how do we water? There are many different methods. You can soak the pot in water for a little while if you want to. You can simply pour some water onto the bark and let it drain through. There's a number of different ways that you can water a plant. On the tag itself, it tells you to do something that I would never recommend. So as far as water is concerned, water with 3 ice cubes, no. Or a 1/4 cup of water weekly. Please don't use ice cubes. If you think about it, this particular plant, it tells you right here, 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, never below 40. Locate away from drafts. So if it's sensitive to colds, what temperature is an ice cube? It's below 40. So please don't use ice cubes. I know some of you are gonna say, I've used ice cubes for years, everything's fine, blah, 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 blah. That's great that you got away with it. I'm telling you right now, it's a bad idea. You can do what you want, but that's my recommendation. Do not use ice cubes. So a 1/4 cup of water. So 1/4 cup of water weekly, that is not a lot of water. So that gives you an indication that these plants really don't need a lot of water. One word of caution when you are watering these plants is you're gonna wanna make sure you don't get any water in the leaf joints. And the reason for that is plants don't grow up right like this typically. This particular type of orchid typically does not grow upright like this on the side of a tree or a branch or whatever. It usually grows sort of sideways, and I can show you that with this plant over here. This is typically what you're gonna see with an orchid in the wild. It's gonna grow sideways. So it's gonna attach itself to the branch or the tree, and it's gonna grow sideways. And it's excellent, just like perfectly designed to shed water. Because when the water hits the leaf joints, it runs back out. And so no moisture is really gonna gather in the leaf joints. Now, if you live in Florida and they're blinding hot temperatures, chances are if you get a little water in the leaf joint, it's not gonna be a big deal because it's going to burn off and it's not gonna sit there for a very long time. If you live in New York like I do, that water is gonna sit there for a very long time, and you could end up with something called stem rot, and that's really very detrimental to the plant. So when you're gonna water, just make sure you're watering the media and try not to get anything into the leaf joints. So as far as repotting is concerned, when do we repot? So typically you're gonna wanna repot your orchids if you're using media every 2 to 3 years. And that's because organic media does have a tendency to break down. So as with anything else in nature, it doesn't stay like this forever. It's gonna start to break down, it's gonna start to lose that airflow, and it's also gonna start to turn acidic. Now, when you get a brand new plant from the store, it's generally gonna have been in this pot for over a year, sometimes close to 2 years. So when you get the plant, it's usually due for a repot. Now, a lot of people are afraid of repotting orchids when they have a flower spike. It could be that it might affect your flower spike, and it might not. If you notice that your plant is not well and the plant's starting to droop and you're watering it and it's still starting to droop and you think it's in like a dire situation, getting it out of the pot, getting it into better media is more important than the flower spike. The flower spike will come back. The plant won't once it's dead. So in my mind, repotting the orchid soon after you get it is a better idea. If it's a really healthy plant like this one, my husband picked this out and I'm really, really proud of him because he did an excellent job. If it's a healthy plant like this one, don't worry about it right away. It's not in a dire situation. The roots are really healthy. You can't see, there's like one right there that's not healthy, but in a general sense, the roots seem to be in pretty good shape. The foliage is in good shape. The flower spike is in good shape. So I am not concerned about getting this plant out of the pot right away. But if you buy a plant and it seems to be spiraling out of control, the flowers are dropping off, the leaves are drooping even though you're watering it, the roots are looking kind of dead like that instead of healthy like that, then you might want to consider repotting it while it's in spike. Now, as far as fertilizing is concerned, a lot of people ask me about my fertilizing, and it's such a tough subject really because my circumstances are different than yours. Even if you live in the same town as me, the type of heating I have in my house, the type of lighting I give my orchids, the amount of humidity that I keep in my room is always going to be different than yours. So you really have to educate yourself about what these plants need before you can decide what type of fertilizer you're going to use, how often you use it, etc. So definitely educate yourself about orchid needs as far as nutrients are concerned, but also about your water. Are you going to use tap water? Are you going to use distilled water? Are you going to use RO water or reverse osmosis water? These are all questions that are going to influence what type of fertilizer you use, how often you use it, etc. So for instance, for me, I live in New York, upstate New York. It's cold here, but my orchids grow in a room where there is full sun all day. So it's hot in there. It gets up to 85 degrees in there, even in the winter, and that's with no supplemental heating. So even though I grow in New York, it's pretty warm in my grow room. Additionally, I have a humidifier going, so there's always moisture in the air. The humidity in the air is generally around 50 to 60%. That is high for inside a house. So those things are going to influence how often I water and what type of fertilizer I use, how much fertilizer I use. I, in general, use an MSU fertilizer. And basically what that is it's just a type of fertilizer that scientists have developed that's supposed to be a completely nutritional mix for our orchids. I also supplement with calcium, magnesium. I also will occasionally give them seaweed extract, but in a general sense, I stick with that type of a product, with the MSU fertilizer, because I feel like it's the best balanced diet for my orchid. Now, some people have asked me, what about garlic water? What about rice water? What about banana water? What about this water? What about that water? I honestly don't know. I have done zero research into any of those things because I don't think I need to. In a general sense, I am very much behind going organic. I think that organic is usually best. However, you have to give your orchid a balanced diet. You can't just give them one nutrient and expect them to be healthy. It may be that they're nutrient deficient and that one nutrient is going to assist the orchid to feel better, but if you consistently just give them single nutrient solutions, they're going to become deficient in something else. It's like when you decide to go vegetarian or you decide to go vegan. You're not just going to start eating plants. You're going to educate yourself about what nutrients you're missing by not eating animal products. It's the same thing with orchids. You have to educate yourself about what nutrients they're going to be missing if you decide to go with an organic fertilizer. So that's basically what I wanted to say. As far as the watering is concerned as well, I do also have like a high pH water. I use well water, which is pretty much clean. It's only 65 parts per million. That's the hardness of the water, so it's pretty clean, but the pH is very high. So I do actually use a pH down to get the pH more to a little bit below basic. Basic is like a 7. And I hope I'm not confusing anybody with what I'm saying, because I know when I first started watching videos, like, what is basic? What is alkaline? What is acidic? What does that mean? So if you go online and you basically just Google a pH chart, nutrient pH chart, it's going to show you what pH nutrients are available to plants. And then if you test the pH of your water, you're going to see if it's at a pH that the plants are going to be able to absorb nutrients. And there are products out there that can either raise or lower your pH. Now, there are people that grow orchids that don't care about any of this, and they have beautiful plants. So the whole fertilizing, pH, yada yada, if this is just a hobby and you have like 1 or 2 plants and they're Phalaenopsis orchids, you're going to be fine. But if you are looking for answers and you're searching for things to make your orchids better and you have an extensive collection, then educating yourself about pH and fertilizer is probably a good idea. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm sure you're going to. I tried to put my thoughts together in the most comprehensive way, but I always feel like I'm rambling and I'm forgetting something. So if I did, please let me know, and I will either do a supplemental video or I will answer your question. As always, I hope you guys are all doing fantastic. Thank you so much for watching my videos, and I will talk to you all next time.